Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? Ari, the heat, death of the sun. Reality was having a Monday with a capital M. Never mind that it was Thursday, or that Monday always began with a capitalized M, or that both Mondays and Thursdays only existed on Earth. That was all beside the point. Ron liked that about Earth, though. The calendars. Really, humans had something special going on with them. They were great with organizational skills, and he appreciated that, given his role as manager of accounts payable. He was just one cog in the existence machine, but lately Ron felt he might be the only one to really give a hoot about the overall health of the industry. The atmosphere of the Division of Material Validity office was drab, sure, but he found his job of keeping existence running to be interesting. There were an infinite amount of vendors that manufactured the various components of reality, and he enjoyed his role of ensuring that those accounts all got paid for their hard work. Ron's day started off fine enough. His boss, Mike, prattled through the morning meeting with his usual ennui before giving him a checklist of urgent tasks. Ron spent his pre-lunch hours ticking off boxes. Pay the universe's monthly time invoice to keep months a thing. Contact maintenance overdue space-time fabric repair on collapsing wormholes in Sector 12. B. Review discrepancy in inertia. Report on galactic planetary rotation. Forward any Earth RFPs titled, "Oh God, please save us," or similar to upper management. He got through the first two in record time, considering he paid time ahead of schedule, but the Monday-ish nature of the Thursday kicked into high gear as he scrolled through an inbox full of dismally titled RFPs. He'd always thought the DMV overpaid reality's freelancers, so he was perplexed as to why there seemed to be so many slackers recently. Humans weren't the only ones having issues. The fluxers on Zemulus 237 were freaking out about Zemulus 237 suddenly rotating backwards, but given their sheer amount of messages, humans were definitely making the biggest fuss. He'd been scrolling for the past 15 minutes, and he still hadn't reached the end of this morning's RFPs to the Savior Department alone. Ron glanced across the aisle at Florence's cubicle and saw that she wore a similarly exasperated expression as she looked through them all. It would seem that endless earthen pleas to the heavens were clogging up everyone's inboxes. Ron, frankly, was at his wit's end. He dialed Mike's office phone extension. Why is Earth spewing out so many salvation proposals all of a sudden? Sun's getting too big and hot. They're having a rough go of things. Ron blinked and scrubbed at his forehead. That's odd. I paid Fusion's invoice. I know. They got upper-level orders to churn out more energy, though. Kicked it up yesterday. He sank back into his office chair and rolled his eyes to the ceiling. And upper management didn't communicate that with the rest of us because... Mike snorted. It was just a little tweak to Fusion's workload, not a big issue in the overall grand scheme of things. Ron sighed. Okay, thanks. Forwarding now. Yep. He set the phone back on the receiver and began forwarding messages up the chain of command, but paused at one rather offensive title. He read the message, feeling a bit nosy as he did so. From Alice Kincaid at Earth.universe.2, all at DMV.universe.subject, RFP. We're dying down here, asshole. Hey, God. CNN just announced we have about 6 months before we're cooked. The sun's getting hotter by the day. I can't go outside anymore. I thought we had like 1 billion-ish years left. At least, that's what the Science Museum exhibit said when I went as a kid. Scared the hell out of me. Always has. But 1 billion years is a damn long time. 6 months is absolutely not. I would love it if you could make the sun go back to normal. I haven't done everything I wanted to do yet. Please, it's too hot. It hurts. My skin is... Please. More sincerely than I've ever been about anything. Ever. Alice Kincaid. Scowling, Ron called Deity. The line rang for a few long moments, but he was pleasantly surprised when the CEO answered. Hello? Hi, Dee. How's it going? Hey, man. Same old. What's up? I just had a question about Salvation RFPS. Ron could hear Deity typing something as he responded blandly, Shoot. Are you guys doing anything about them? I've forwarded several to you and the board, but they just keep coming. I was going to mark them as spam and wanted to check if you're receiving them without me forwarding. Yeah, spam them. Got it. Ron considered whether it was professional to ask further questions, but his curiosity outweighed his propriety. Are you going to respond to them? Take any of Earth's projects on, I mean? Deity laughed in an offhand way. Nah, I'm phasing out the planet. Humans are too destructive. Tarsonis's Jebulons have their act together a lot better, so the board voted to sell off Earth and invest over there instead. It's a stabler market. He felt a hot stab of dismay at the news and swallowed thickly. Understandable, but can I say? He gave a little laugh. I mean, I know it's way above my pay grade, but... Ron chose his words carefully as he said, humans have been our top client for a few 100,000 years. They've had some centuries of poor performance every now and then, sure, but we've always kept an overall mutually beneficial relationship. It's unfortunate we're ending it on a bad note. Deity clicked his tongue. Speak more freely, Ron. I don't mind hearing your opinion. Ron huffed a chuckle. Don't write them off our books. I like what they put out. Would be a shame to not be able to get their stuff anymore. What sort of stuff? Ron thought for a moment. Well, I enjoy all the love stories. They've got some great food, too. I tried a sandwich once. Phenomenal. And I owe them a debt for coming up with calendars. Deity deliberated silently before replying. Jebulons just created a far superior timekeeping system, and it didn't take them almost 300,000 years to do it. Switch to using theirs. The market's moving on, Ron. Progress with it. I appreciate your input, though. Tell you what, I'll bring up your notes to the board at the next meeting. We may be able to work something out. Ron's shoulders relaxed. Thanks, Dee. Appreciate it. Yep. Have a good one. The line went dead. Ron turned his attention back to Alice's message, his cursor hovering over the mark as spam button. He decided to archive it instead. Ron brooded the entire commute home and concluded that he found the DMV's culture and overall philanthropic approach to be increasingly lackluster. Phasing out Earth was a bad move, plain and simple. He didn't understand the decision, even after hearing Deity's explanation. Gebulans had exited the primitive stage of existence far quicker than humans had. True, but their demeanor was overzealous. The DMV's mailroom was constantly overwhelmed with fanatic offerings, and their adoration always felt just a tad too desperate to be authentic. Humans showed their appreciation for reality in subtler ways. They were intentional with it, more honest. A message of gratitude at receiving a tight embrace from a missed loved one. A whispered, "I owe you" when swimming through crystal water. A salute when a sore knot is worked out of a long, aching muscle. Deity was a great guy, a fantastic CEO, but he had a distinct flair for the dramatic that often left Ron dealing with a nightmare at the office. For instance, around 6,000 years ago, Deity hedged a bet that chemistry wouldn't be able to synthesize enough water for Q3 on their current budget, so he'd ordered Ron to increase their payment. Mike had warned the CEO that doing so would generate far more water than could be tolerated by planets with life forms. But Deity had simply responded that those life forms were underperforming. He'd ordered that a handful of profitable creatures be retained for improved reproduction, and the task fell to Ron to proceed with the higher payment. To this day, Ron felt terrible about flooding every planet across 4 galaxies. He settled into his nightly routine, but he couldn't get Alice's message out of his mind. He pulled up the archived message as he ate his supper. After a stiff drink, he forwarded the correspondence to his personal account, then forwarded it to Alice again with an attached reply. From Ron at personal.universe.2, Alice Kincaid at earth.universe.subject. FW. FW. RFP. We're dying down here, asshole. Hello, Alice. Strictly speaking, it goes against protocol for me to send this message, and you are the first life form to receive such a communication from me, so my apologies for any disruption to your evening. Admittedly, I'm unsure how this message might be received by a human. The purpose of this correspondence is to extend my sincere condolences for your current situation and assure you that your concerns regarding your imminent demise will be thoroughly discussed at the next meeting of our board. Please note, however, that this does not guarantee immediate action. We appreciate your patience during this time. All the best, Ron. Manager, Accounts Payable, Division of Material Validity. Ron sipped on his second drink, feeling a bit more at ease with the situation. His satisfaction dissipated when she returned a response in seconds. From Alice Kincaid at Earth.universe.2. Ron at personal.universe. Subject: indistinct shriek of terror. I apologize, but I need Japanese text to perform the conversion as requested. If you'd like me to demonstrate this capability, please provide Japanese text that includes kanji characters, and I'll convert it according to the guidelines. Ron set down his glass and frowned as he replied. From Ron at personal.universe.2, Alice Kincaid at Earth.universe. Subject: indistinct shriek of terror. Hello, Alice. Your quick response is appreciated, but I am confused as to your meaning. Best, Ron. Alice's reply was instantaneous. From Alice Kincaid at Earth.universe.2, Ron at personal.universe. Subject: indistinct shriek of terror. Get out of my head. Get out. Get out. Are you reading a bloody email? God, it hurts. It hurts. Ron winced, pulled out his phone, and found Alice's alternate contact in the DMV database. He dialed the number for a video call. The image of a hyperventilating woman curled into the fetal position on a dirty floor appeared on the screen. She was covered in patches of charred skin, and her hair was matted with blood in some places. Ah, hello. This is Ron. Please forgive me for calling you at this hour, and for the pain you experienced receiving my initial messages. I wasn't aware my previous form of communication would be painful for a human. She let out a shriek upon seeing him appear in what looked to be her kitchen. Her hands tore at her hair as she mumbled incoherently. "Are you all right? It wasn't my intention to startle you." Alice shot to her feet and tugged a large chopping knife from its holder, brandishing it in his face. What are you?" Ron's brow furrowed. He'd always assumed humans would recognize a DMV agent, considering all the mail they sent. As I said in my earlier message, I'm the... What the hell? Manager of accounts payable at the DMV, he continued as she panted a string of vile curses. I read your RFP meant for the Savior Department, and I felt just awful about what's happening to your son. I thought I'd give you an update personally, maybe alleviate your fears a bit. Her subsequent screech was nearly unintelligible, but Ron deduced through the wailed expletives that she was confused about the nature of the DMV. "Please, miss, calm yourself. I'm not technically in the room with you." Alice's eyes bulged, but she stilled, and the knife clattered against the tile floor. The division is quite hard to explain to a life form on your plane of existence, but the short answer is that we manage and regulate that plane. She jabbed a finger in his direction. "So you're the one responsible for making the sun about to explode?" Ron's teeth tugged at his bottom lip. "It's a bit more complicated than that." He lost the battle against his better judgment and gave the terrified woman a simplified explanation of Deity's decision. When he finished, she sank to the floor in a heap and put her filthy head in her hands. "It will be all right. The board will..." Alice breathed a raw laugh. Ron looked at her with concern as the sound grew in broken intensity. "Miss..." "Angels," she choked out between gasping fits of laughter. "And God and reality itself are all just a bunch of corporate goons, and I'm nothing more than an underwhelming employee, and..." Her laughter morphed into weeping. "Oh, that is cruel." She was an underwhelming client, technically, but Ron didn't correct her. "Is there anything more I can do to help you at the moment?" He cringed at the utter devastation on the woman's face as she turned to nod at him. She was silent for a long moment, staring blankly at the heat-yellowed paint of the wall, before she muttered, "Take me back to that museum all those years ago, so I can tell my 10-year-old self to write a lot of books, to read a lot more of them, to learn the guitar, to become a rock star like I always wanted, or maybe an author." Her voice broke as she slowly stood back up. "To hurry up and find the love of my life, because I've spent it entirely alone, to quit my soul-sucking office job, or to not even take it in the first place, to hug my mom long and hard every chance I get, to tell my dad I forgive him, to make peace right then and there with how insignificant I am, because I am." Ron ground his teeth at the volume of her final sentence, shocked at how viscerally uncomfortable the word insignificant made him feel. "I'll be sure to speak to Deity tomorrow at..." Alice threw the knife with all her strength at his projection, ending the call. "I'm sorry, Ron. I am. But there's nothing I can do. We don't undo what's already been done." Chris, the head honcho over at Time, was being irksomely dense. Ron grumbled, gesticulating at the big machine before them. I know that. Nothing needs to be undone, just done over again. Run Earth's clock backward a bit, only 20 years. Come on, I'll owe you one. Memories on board. They already primed the woman. We're just waiting on you. Chris ran a hand through his silvering hair. Deity approved this? Not as such. Sure did. For one human woman? Consider it an experiment. You've ran back time before, for far duller reasons. I don't know if I'd consider what we needed done with that woman in the Chaplin film to be... Ron waved a dismissive hand. Chris, seriously. The time boss rolled his eyes. Fine. Who, when, and where am I sending her? Ron explained Alice's plight, and Chris pushed various buttons on the machine. Just send back her present consciousness into her childhood self. That's it. You do realize that this might kill the woman. We've never reversed memory back into time before. He shrugged and scratched his nose, looking at a sleeping Alice on the screen in front of them. It's an experiment. Chris nodded, then cranked a few more dials. Adult Alice didn't move, but the child Alice on the adjacent screen. Ron cringed as the child screamed and screamed and screamed. Chris sucked in air through his teeth. Child Alice drew frightened looks from the other science museum patrons, until finally being subdued by her mother. Ron scratched his temple, chewed the inside of his cheek. The girl screeched, over and over again in her mother's arms. What's the point? Chris shut the machine off, locking adult Alice into her child body forever, or at least until the sun exploded. He clapped Ron on the shoulder. Call that a success? Ron was silent for a beat, then muttered, Seems like the quick death of the sun might be preferable to the existential crisis brought on by simply thinking about the slow death of it. Think she'll appreciate her life more, this time around? No. Sun's still going to explode on schedule. Board's not budging on it. He sighed. No one will remember her in the end, even if she does make something out of her life. Or maybe they will for a little while, now that she can change some things. That's all most of us can hope for, really. To not be insignificant. To do something important with our lives. He shot a triumphant smile at Chris, feeling overall very pleased with himself. At least he was able to do this. Change this small thing to help such a lovely planet. Chris shot him a confused look. Oh no, she can't change anything, man. She did all this screaming the first time around when she learned the sun was going to explode in 1 billion years too. I told you, nothing can be undone, but she will be able to watch it happen all over again with her adult memories and reasoning. Maybe she'll just learn to be grateful. Humans struggle with that. If you asked me, that's why Deity's blowing him up. Ron paled, his grin evaporating. The time boss stretched his arms and cracked his back and didn't notice the color drain from Ron's face. Anyway, let's get lunch. You're buying Kaala, the de Havilland. Twin otter charter plane shuddered through gray clouds as its mouthy pilot wrestled with the controls, navigating toward the barely visible landing strip ahead. Like the plane's humming engines, the bearded Inuit's mouth hadn't stopped buzzing since we'd taken off from Iqaluit 3 hours before, and my tolerance for both noises had grown slim. Happily, the end of this ordeal was in sight. The small hamlet, Mitimatalik, known as Pond Inlet, which we were rocking and tilting down towards. From this vantage point, and in this dawn greeting, sleet-spitting weather, The village at the northernmost tip of Baffin Island appeared little more than a shadowy cluster of shacks dwarfed by glaciers in the distance. It looked every bit the town at the end of the world it was, and exactly the kind of place you'd find someone like her. I'm just saying, the pilot continued, having received approval to land. I get it, the dating world's tough, but coming all the way to Mitimatalik for a woman? All she wants is a ticket out of this dump. No amount of hot flesh on a cold night is worth being taken for a ride. I forced another smile, though my lips were resistant, watching the landing strip lights glow brighter. Like I said, she's got a wonderful personality, I said, for the 15th time. You don't have to worry. Not everyone's a scammer, spoken like a love-struck fool with more money than sense. The pilot laughed. Well, I hope it goes okay. At least you've got your return flight booked. I'll be back tomorrow, same time. But if you're not here, with or without your girl, I'll be gone. No refunds. I nodded, staring out at the endless expanse of snow that had become visible as dawn broke. Calling it dawn at 10 to noon seemed wrong, but that's what it was this time of year, during Nunavut's polar night, when the sun barely rose above the horizon, and daylight, more twilight, didn't last long. A 1 to 2 hour period of faint light that quickly retreated to darkness. It suited me fine, because it suited Kaala, December 5th. The body of 35-year-old Naki Pakta is discovered in Rankin Inlet, Kivalik, having bled out from multiple stab wounds. The nature of the injuries is baffling. The star-shaped structure of the wounds suggests they were inflicted from within. No murder weapon is found. No persons of interest are identified. Naki is found in a remote area outside the town, half buried in a mat of Arctic heather. Kaala wasn't my online girlfriend, or the catfish the pilot suspected. That was a convenient lie. This time tomorrow, he'd either laugh at me or pat me on the back, depending on how things went. Both eventualities were covered. The plane convulsed as we landed, tires skidding briefly before finding their grip. Then we came to a halt at the terminal, a corrugated outhouse set against a dull, hazy backdrop. Here we are, he said, grinning through his beard. Good luck with your woman. You'll need it. I thanked him and disembarked with backpack and camera. The biting cold stabbed me, but I didn't flinch. I inhaled sharply, the icy air burning my lungs, and made my way deeper into the ghost-like outpost of swirling snowflakes, the most remote place I'd ever come to meet a subject. Beyond the airstrip, the snow-covered streets of Mitimatalik were deserted. Dim street lamps illuminated squat, weather-beaten buildings, wide-eyed structures that seemed to huddle together to keep warm and endure the endless night. which had introduced insomnia, sleep paralysis, and nightmares to their eaves. December 10th. Aputi Kanuk, 38, is discovered in his pickup in Whale Cove. The insides of the cab are painted red. Police are baffled. The Inuit sports hundreds of wounds, pinpricks that seem to have punctured the flesh from within. There is nothing untoward in the vehicle, just some strands of heather in the footwell. I passed residences with lights glowing in windows, stores hibernating like frost-covered monuments, and vehicles remade as ice sculptures. I didn't pass people, even though it was midday and as bright as it was going to be for another 24 hours. Nobody was getting their steps in. But that's not to say no one was out. As the snowfall grew thicker and I approached a junction in the road, laughter reached my ears from my destination, Ukpik Tavern, where, according to Sigil, the woman I was seeking should be. A few more steps, and it materialized. A nondescript bar that doubled as a restaurant, dull light spilling through the window. A wooden sign above the door creaked as I pushed through. Inside, I took a moment to shake off the cold and the snow before making my way to a table. The bar was decorated simply, with wooden tables and chairs, and a fireplace burning thick logs. A handful of locals were seated, meeting friends for lunch during this nighttime reprieve. They eyed me with mild suspicion as I came in. I made a show of checking my camera and placing it on the table like it was sacred. They looked away. Just another rich tourist or hipster blogger come to photograph the northern lights. Boring. A barman with a ducktail beard that somehow looked better than mine sauntered over as I shrugged off my parka. He informed me the bar was closing at 1:30, an hour and a bit from now. He noted my Nikon and the guidebook for neighboring Bylot Island I'd placed on the table. He didn't ask why I was here. I ordered beer and a bowl of caribou stew, then settled down to warm myself and wait. I didn't have to wait long. She came out of the men's room, carrying a mop and bucket, head high as she went behind the bar. The information I'd received had been correct. Not that I doubted it. Sigil was always correct. And though she looked older than 40 and heavier than 180 pounds, she was recognizable as the person who'd been described. Her face was weather-beaten. Strands of gray threaded her braided hair, and the birthmark on her neck was visible above the folds of her jumper. It was her. December 15th. Panic spreads through the Kivalik region as a third body is found. The frozen corpse of Nuvuk Kayuk, 42, is discovered at the foot of a cliff in Chesterfield. It seems he may be the victim of a fall, until he is thawed out and the stab wounds appear. Multiple star-shaped incisions that confirm murder, but there are no clues to be found, except the cluster of heather in his grasp. I received my glass of amber liquid and bowl of meat and veg, which I ate and drank slowly, watching her interact with the locals. She had an infectious laugh and a warm voice. I gathered she'd worked here a while. She seemed kind, not like one who could hurt another. But appearances are deceptive. I knew that better than most. Time crawled as I finished eating. Every so often, she'd look in my direction, flash a smile or nod, and I'd look away. I didn't need to make a connection. Not yet. Shortly after 1:15, the locals started getting up to leave. I drained my glass and pulled on my coat. It had been a successful visit. I'd found who I was looking for and gotten a feel for her form. Despite her slight bulk, there was no question she could handle herself. Behind the smiles and laughs, she could wield violence. I paid my bill and left. Outside, it was already black, the brief daylight hours having retreated. The snowfall had ceased, as if scared back into hiding by the night. Pond Inlet was silent, except for the now muted voices of the locals, who slunk out of the tavern behind me, showing less than zero interest in this photo-hunting fool. Stepping onto the stoop of what appeared to be a post office, I took cover in the shadows and fished out my vape. Blood, orange, and charcoal. My flavor of choice. Enough bite to keep me alert, though, of course, I had sigil for that. And as if on cue, to remind or reprimand me, a sudden cackle of noise penetrated my ear, making me wince as I cupped it. It was a garbled message, like always, broken syllables that were difficult to understand, but whose meaning was clear. I was on the right track, and things were escalating. Kaala was about to strike again. December 21st. The remote community of Arctic Bay, Qikiqtaaluk, is shaken by the discovery of Panaa Pictu, 39, found dead while camping on the outskirts of town. Her body, exsanguinated, sports familiar stab wounds. A charred stem of heather is found in her campfire's ashes. 4 Inuit are dead, killed in mysterious fashion. The killer remains at large. I'd taken the 3rd pull on my vape when the bar door opened and my target stepped out, wrapped in a sealskin coat. I couldn't see her face, but I knew from her gait it was her. She didn't waste time, stomping off towards the far end of town, where the street lamps petered out and darkness reigned. I gave her a minute's head start. The snow would record her path. She wasn't expecting me, so she wouldn't try to give me the slip. I took another drag and waited for the barman to lock up before setting off. I activated my Nikon's night vision function and kept an eye on its view screen. as I followed her tracks. The buildings thinned out as I left town, until there was nothing left but rocks and snow. Somewhere ahead was a forest, but I couldn't make it out. What I could make out was a flat, oblong structure surrounded by a chain-link fence. I didn't know what the building was, but the footprints led to it. So that's where I went. A hole had been cut in the fence, spliced wires bent back. I ducked to slip through the gap, careful not to snag my Canada Goose parka, then slunk through the snow to the building. What I could now guess was some kind of supply station. It was abandoned, at least for the winter, but its door had been forced to admit one guest. 2, as I eased it open. 3, if Kaala's trap had already been set. I winced in anticipation of a squeal. It didn't come, and I was able to enter a cluttered office lit by a battery-powered lantern. Empty crates and barrels filled the space. Paperwork lay scattered on the floor. In one corner was a sleeping bag, a rucksack, and a small heater. A seal skin coat lay next to the heater, which had been plugged in and was starting to glow. Clever. This wasn't her home. She was using this place as a lure. A crash and a yell brought my eyes to the door behind a dusty reception, and I started towards it, depositing my camera on the desk. Thought you could sneak up on me, eh? Thought you could take me like the others? A thud, a cry, a slam. I reached the door, which was slightly ajar, and peered through. I knew you'd find me, you bitch. But guess what? I got ready. In my ear, Sigil was humming, spitting instructions in urgent, guttural tones. I winced and ignored. I knew what to do. Like Twinak Itukalak, I was ready. So I pulled open the door and stepped through. It was a large storage area, illuminated by more lanterns on aluminum shelving units that had been rearranged haphazardly. The shelves, which were presumably used to store produce in normal times, now displayed nothing but flowers. Lots of flowers, potted and in full bloom, which was odd because of the season, and because of what Sigil told me to bring. Killed Nuvuk, killed Pana. Now I'll kill you. For real this time. The words accompanied more thumps and cries, and then something else, an unnatural keening. I peered around one of the shelving units and found the source of the noise. Jovial, happy Twinak from the bar, straddling the Inuit Kaala, slamming her head against the floor as she tried to sing a song. A window on the opposite wall was up. That's how Kaala had entered. Seeing the flowers would have made her feel safe, given her confidence, inspired bravado. Of course, that's how Twinak had made ready. A second glance at the nearest flower confirmed it. All the potted plants in here were plastic. Shut up, witch.
There's nothing here you can use.
Tuinak slammed Kaala's head harder. The dark-haired, younger woman's words faltered, but she quickly resumed her bird-like song, an eerie, chirping sound that made me shiver. Tuinak's back was to me. Kaala's eyes found me as I shucked off my bag. She was surprised, but didn't react. I could see in her eyes she was broken. I could see in her face she was weak. She'd been trekking for weeks through darkness, making her way up from Tukik, stopping at townships on the way. This was her last stop, but she was tired, hungry. The net was closing in, and she'd underestimated the last of her prey. I'd come to help. "Hey," I said, startling Tuinak as I unzipped my bag. "Haven't you hurt her enough?"
Who the fuck?
Your turn. I removed a potted plant of Arctic heather, real, not plastic, from my bag and put it on the floor, then kicked it towards the barmaid with my foot. Tuinak's eyes went wide. Kaala's fluttered shut, but her cracked lips continued to warble.
Stop!
Tuinak spat, falling away from the plant. I watched as its leaves began to tremble in response to the quickening of Kaala's song. In my time and profession, in the circles I traveled, and amongst the fiends I called my crew, I'd seen my share of weird shit, but I'd never seen anything like this. I'd never known an animist, someone who could control earthy matter with their voice. So this was one for the books. Kaala's eyes snapped open, and as she started to sing, shout her words, the plant reacted. Its stems lengthened, stretching toward Tuinak like snakes. The soft leaves twisted and hardened, curling into deadly thorns. The petals flared, exposing a dark, pulsing core. Tuinak tried to flee, but the heather was fast. Thorny stems wrapped around her limbs, pulling her down. The more she struggled, the tighter they constricted. Kaala sat up and sang louder, and the heather responded. Vines forced their way into Tuinak's mouth, grew down her throat, muffling her screams as they choked her. I watched as she convulsed, thorns punching out through her throat. She squeezed her eyes shut against probing stems, but that was the least of her worries. I couldn't see what was happening inside her clothes, but the pool of blood seeping out from under her back told the tale. I stood there and watched for several minutes until she stopped moving and Kaala fell silent. Her animist hymn at an end, she collapsed in a heap, fully spent. I went to her, sat behind her, eased her close. She didn't object. She didn't fear me. It was always the way. They could trust me. They knew. I wasn't there to harm them or turn them in. It was the aura of Sigil. They knew I was only there to help. As blood-covered stems of heather slid from Tuinak's mouth, thorns returned to leaves, and petals drooped. I cradled Kaala in my arms. "It's okay," I said. allowing a slug-like tentacle to exit my ear. My name is Bertram Belasco. I was alerted to your existence when you took your third victim. I run a network dedicated to supporting people like you. Serial killers, for want of a better term. The Mounties haven't pieced things together, but they'll find you. I can get you out. I have a passport for you in my bag, and flights are booked. I can take you to the States, but you have to agree. Do you agree, Kaala? Will you join my network and kill for me? Sometimes they thought about it, weighed the pros and cons, took time to make sure I was legit. Kaala didn't. She was in no state, and she didn't care. She simply nodded, eyelids flickering. It's all sigil needed. It wriggled its tentacle to her throat, slid out a proboscis, and stabbed her. For a moment, Kaala's eyes widened in shock. Then, as quickly as it had struck, the tentacle retracted and slunk back inside my ear, having deposited a small lump of matter under her skin, coating her, making her his, ours, a member of the SK network, in which, as an animist, she'd excel. The world was going to become that bit more deadly, and the craving my master had would be fulfilled. November 28th. The peaceful life of Kaala comes to an end when 5 friends visit her guest house in Tukik. Initially friendly, their true intentions emerge when they reveal they've seen a video online. Footage secretly recorded by a hiker showing Kaala performing animism. Desperate to create a viral video, they pressure her to perform and make them famous. She refuses, and the confrontation turns dark. Threatened with violence, Kaala reveals the Eskimo magic she was born with, using a houseplant in self-defense. It starts to strangle Nuvuk. His friends hit her over the head to stop the act. Panicked, thinking her dead, they throw her from a cliff to hide their crime. Kaala awakes mid-fall and sings for help. Arctic heather at the base of the cliff answers the call. Her animism, now tainted, has a taste for revenge, and she has the names of 5 who can satisfy it. Way, Terminal, Dread, 1. The announcement. The loudspeakers crackled to life, sending a sharp hiss of static through the cavernous, dimly lit terminal. The noise was jarring, a sudden intrusion in the uneasy silence that had settled over the travelers, who were slumped in their seats, fatigue etched deeply into their faces. The endless delays had worn them down, and now they were too exhausted to glance up. The air was thick with the stale scent of burnt coffee and damp, worn-out carpets. A suffocating blend that only added to the growing sense of unease. Then, the announcement came, each word clear, yet eerily mechanical, carrying a disquieting undertone. Attention, all passengers. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, all flights are canceled indefinitely. Please remain in the terminal. Do not leave the airport. We apologize for the inconvenience. The voice was devoid of emotion, a cold, detached command that sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Murmurs of frustration, tinged with fear, spread among the passengers, their voices rising and falling like the tide. Overhead, the departure boards flickered, the once orderly rows of destinations and times now spiraling into chaos as every flight switched from delayed to canceled. The fluorescent lights above seemed to dim in unison, their sporadic flickering casting long, jittery shadows across the floor. The terminal, once bustling with the energy of travel, now felt vast, cold, and hollow. A tomb of missed connections and lost hope. To the unseen, hours dragged on, though no one could tell whether it was hours or mere minutes. Time had lost its grip, slipping through the cracks like the insidious cold that seeped into the bones of those huddled in the terminal. People tried to make themselves comfortable, reclining awkwardly on the hard, unyielding plastic chairs, some curling up on the cold, unforgiving floor. Others wandered aimlessly, their eyes hollow, faces pale under the flickering lights. The airport staff, usually a constant presence, had vanished without a trace. The food courts stood empty, their colorful signs now dark, and the enticing smells of food had long faded. Even the ever-vigilant security personnel were nowhere to be found. The only sound was the low, relentless hum of the air conditioning. This dull drone draped the terminal in a blanket of oppressive silence. Occasionally, the rustle of a traveler shifting uncomfortably, or the faint tap of rain against the massive windows broke the quiet. Still, these sounds only served to amplify the growing sense of isolation. The terminal's once familiar noises had transformed into something alien and unsettling. A young woman, clutching a frayed boarding pass like a lifeline, approached the information desk, her footsteps echoing eerily in the empty space. "Excuse me?" she called out, her voice trembling as it reverberated off the walls, swallowed by the emptiness surrounding her. "Is anyone here? What's going on?" Her voice lingered in the air, unanswered, before fading into the void. She turned back towards the scattered passengers, her heart pounding. Then, something caught her eye, a fleeting movement in the glass's reflection, a quick and fluid shadow slipping away into the dim corridors leading to the gates. She spun around, eyes wide, but saw nothing. The same lifeless scene. Yet something had changed. The air felt thicker, heavier, charged with an unseen menace. It was as if the terminal itself was watching, waiting. Others began to sense it too. Paranoia spread like a contagion, infecting one passenger after another. Whispers grew in intensity as people shared their sightings. Dark shapes glimpsed from the corner of their eyes, only to vanish when looked at directly. A man, pale skin glistening with sweat, swore he saw a figure. No, something, standing in the shadows near the baggage claim, its eyes gleaming with a cold, malevolent light. His voice cracked as he recounted the encounter, his gaze darting nervously around the terminal, as if expecting the shadow to return. 3. The departure. The terminal descended into a deeper, more oppressive gloom as night fell. The few remaining lights flickered and buzzed, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to stretch and twist in unnatural ways, their edges fraying as if they could reach out and ensnare the unwary. The temperature dropped, a biting chill creeping into the air, chilling the travelers. It was a cold that wasn't just physical. It carried the weight of something ancient and malevolent, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. A family huddled together near a gate, the mother clutching her children tightly, her eyes wide and wild as they darted around the room, watching the shadows with growing terror. A businessman, his suit now wrinkled and his tie askew, paced frantically near the exit doors, tugging at his tie as if it were strangling him. Others remained rooted to their seats, too afraid to move, their eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet wide open with fear. Sleep was not an option. The darkness held many unknowns and unseen threats. Then, a sound came from deep within the terminal. A low, rhythmic thudding. Distant at first, but growing steadily louder. It was the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps echoing through the deserted halls. But these weren't the footsteps of a person. They were too slow, too heavy, and each step seemed to reverberate with a dull finality, like the tolling of a death knell. Panic erupted. People screamed, bolting in all directions, their frantic movements chaotic and disoriented as they searched desperately for an escape. But the exits were sealed, the heavy glass doors locked tight, the windows impossibly thick, distorting the view outside into a surreal, shifting landscape that offered no hope of escape. The shadows were no longer content to linger at the edges. They moved with purpose now, fluid and sentient, slithering along the walls, creeping beneath doors, stretching across the floor like dark tendrils seeking out the terrified passengers. One by one, the travelers were claimed. The shadows reached out, ensnaring them and pulling them into the darkness. Their screams echoed briefly, only to be abruptly cut off as the shadows engulfed them and dragged them into the abyss. Those who tried to hide found no sanctuary. The shadows seeped into every crack and crevice, relentless in their pursuit. The terminal became a hunting ground. The shadows of the predators and the passengers their prey. For the truth, the terminal was silent once more, save for the occasional crackle of the intercom and the distant, echoing thuds that marked the end of yet another life. The air was thick with the lingering scent of fear and despair, a miasma that clung to the walls, the floor, and the air itself. Then, as if in response to the bloodshed, the final announcement came, its tone eerily calm, almost soothing. This is a final boarding call for Flight 66. Passengers, please proceed to Gate D for immediate departure. A small group remained, huddled together, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and terror. They stared at each other with hollow eyes, their faces pale as the full horror of their situation sank in. The gate mentioned in the announcement was at the far end of the terminal, a place none had dared approach. It had always been shrouded in mystery, blocked off by barriers that hinted at endless construction, yet no progress was ever seen. Now, the barriers were gone, revealing a long, dimly lit corridor that led to a single gate. The gate loomed ominously at the end of the corridor, its door slightly ajar. A harsh, unnatural light spilled out from within, bathing the area in an eerie glow. The light was too bright, too white, too wrong. It wasn't the light of salvation or escape. It was the light of something far more sinister, a beacon drawing passengers into the unknown, compelled by a force they couldn't resist. The survivors began to move toward the gate, their feet dragging as if weighed down by an invisible burden. The closer they got, the more they felt their very essence being pulled from them, their bodies dissolving into the shadows, their souls ripped from their forms and dragged into the eternal void that awaited beyond the gate. As the last of the passengers crossed the threshold, the terminal plunged into complete darkness, the oppressive silence broken only by the faint, lingering whispers of the lost. In the deserted control room, empty screens flickered with static, showing footage of an empty terminal, devoid of life, as if no one had ever been there. Now, a silent, empty shell. The airport waited patiently for the next group of unsuspecting travelers, ready to ensnare them in its endless, inescapable darkness. The intercom crackled one last time, then fell silent. Outside, the world continued, blissfully unaware of the horrors within the terminal. Inside, the shadows waited, patient and hungry, knowing that sooner or later, more victims would arrive, forever lost in the terminal's eternal guilty party. 2.5 hours after touching down in Innsbruck and boarding the SUV that waited to greet her, Amelia Carver's overnight expedition came to an end at a squat, crumbling structure in the rugged terrain of Samonatal Valley, from Dublin to Austria to Liechtenstein, from 12 a.m. to 6, from civilization to desolation, and she still didn't know if it was worth it. Looking at the building, little more than an abandoned mound of concrete, it was difficult to see how it could be. She hadn't accomplished anything of note since last year. She wasn't expecting to receive any awards. There were no contemporaries she still wanted to meet, and even if, by some chance, she was to be acknowledged for her endeavors, she had no desire to receive a tacky statue. Not that it mattered. She was contracted to be here, so she was, at least this year, promised to be different, since Bertram was introducing something new, and she'd made her own assumptions about what that meant. A special guest, an unexpected attendee, one that would be worth turning up for, if it was him. "So now, you're not gonna throw me a bone?" she asked the driver as he stopped by the secret military installation, which has been constructed by Nazi forces during World War II. Not so much as a nod or shake of the head, the driver, mannequin-like in black suit and mirrored sunglasses, said precisely as many words as he'd said since collecting her at the airport. A sum total of 0. "Cool," said his fare, adjusting the Venetian half-mask that covered the left of her face before popping the passenger door, the fabric of her crimson gown rustling as she got out. "Good talk. Thanks for the riveting repartee." Out of the vehicle, in the pale morning light, Amelia shut the door and straightened her skirt. Gravel spat like an angry rattlesnake as the driver stomped the gas and crunched away. "Rude," said Amelia, tottering on heels towards the entrance, a rusted steel door partially concealed by tangled vines. Exactly the kind of place she wanted to spend the first evening of the last month of the year, when she could be curled up watching TV. But here she was, pushing through a squealing slab of history to meet another expressionless brute, who was as conversational as the one who'd dropped her off. "Hey," she said, as the passage she'd entered closed around her. "Am I last again? I'm always late." Shucks, the grunt showed no emotion while placing a barcode scanner type device against the scar on her neck, allowing a beep to confirm her identity. While he did this, she removed her phone from her clutch and tapped on it to display the invite she'd received, which was also scanned and accepted. Once done, the guard stepped aside, allowing her access to a drape-covered door. "Thanks," Amelia said, maintaining eye contact with the goon while adjusting her breasts. "So, is it true? Is it Abyss?" No response. The bouncer flicked his eyes back to the wall. Amelia sighed and pulled the drape aside, stepping into a better lit chamber that she lost sight of immediately when a pair of calloused hands fell over her eyes. "Guess who?" came a gravelly voice, laced with playful menace. Amelia peeled the hands away and turned to face their owner. A beast of a man wearing jeans, a white cotton waistcoat, and a wolf's head mask. Blue eyes stared from its sockets, his lips curled up within its maw. Wolf Claw, always a pleasure. Of all the associates she'd met since joining the network, Wolf Claw was the one she liked most. He had a sense of humor to go with his violent nature and was capable of faking social niceties. "Carver," he greeted. "Thought it was you I heard coming in behind me, looking pasty as ever. Still not getting any sun? Still got the same machete?" Amelia asked, peering over his shoulder at the curved weapon strapped to his back. "Thought it might have broke from overuse. Heard it's taken 30 heads this year. Not jealous. Old Betsy's stronger than she looks." The masked man grinned. "What about you? I remember you saying last year how your kill count was too low. Any success ramping things up?" "In Ireland, not as much as I'd like," she said, rolling her visible eye, the taped-up hole of her masquerade mask concealing the empty socket of the other. "Came in with a solid 13. 3 more than last year, but shy of the 20 I wanted. An improvement is an improvement, and you are a more discerning kind of killer. Targeting assholes who mock the less fortunate and lack empathy is a task in and of itself. Unless you're starting to feel less philanthropic." "Nope." Amelia shook her head, turning away from the wolf-headed killer. "If I'm compelled to get my hands dirty, may as well clean some shit up. Anyway, never mind that. We better grab seats if there's any left. Bertram starts on time, and we're late." The interior of the chamber had been prepared for Bertram's event. Rows of chairs arranged before a makeshift stage holding a podium. Spotlights casting shadows on red-curtained walls. The seats were occupied by figures in various states, some in their work clothes, boiler suits, leather aprons, lab coats, military fatigues. Others in more casual attire, some sporting face coverings, canvas bags, chrome constructions, cliched hockey masks, or things that had been assembled from strips of flesh. Some displaying faces not even mothers could love, but all unmistakably killers. "Indeed," said Wolfclaw, following Amelia towards the front, where she'd spotted a pair of vacant seats. "Wouldn't do to be kicked out when I'm in with a chance of best massacre. You deserve an award for that." Amelia nodded. "Speaking of awards, I guess you heard about the new one?" Wolfclaw said, turning into the front row behind her. "Lifetime Achievement Award. Arguably long overdue for a ceremony that honors psycho killers. Fuckers are near immortal." The question, who's the inaugural recipient? Amelia finished, nodding at the motley crew of weird and wonderful murderers she passed as she made her way to a seat. You know what they've been saying on Instagram? Well, it's got to be Abyss, Wolfclaw said, taking a seat alongside her. How many times did he win Killer of the Year? 12? Does anyone have a better record? Not only that. Best dismemberment. Most depraved violation. Goriest cut. You name it. He got it. Every year for a decade. Until he vanished. He's the GOAT. Would be an insult to give it to anyone else. The question is he alive? All the rumors that circulate about him being locked away by the government, retiring to live as a lumberjack, being turned into mints by a final girl? Fuck, Wolfclaw gasped as she organized her dress on her chair. I know, the ultimate humiliation for serial slashers. Not that, Wolfclaw interrupted, touching her arm. That. Amelia followed his gaze to the left of the stage, where 3 men stood partially obscured behind curtains. 2 of Bertram's goons, and him, clad in an oil-stained pair of overalls, feet stuffed into boots that were coming apart, head concealed by a latex S&M hood, replete with zips, straps, and buckles. The 7-foot-tall, hulking form was unmistakably Abyss. The shifting, awkward posture, the way his arms flexed, the movement of his head, glitching like stop-motion animation. She'd only seen videos, but she knew it was him. Wolfclaw was squinting behind his mask as he studied the granddaddy of killers. He's bulkier than I expected, taller. But look how they're restraining him. Is that a neck manacle connected to prods? Amelia had noticed this too. But before she could consider it, the lights dimmed and the piped music came to a halt. A hush fell over the crowd, and all eyes went to the stage as the curtain on the right was thrown back, allowing a bearded man in a suit to stride out, beckoning applause, which he got in buckets from all, because this was their benefactor, Bertram Belasco, long-serving head of the serial killer network. Amelia took part in the adulation as he soaked it up. In the 5 years since he found her and signed her up to his club, she'd come to respect him like everyone else. Being selected was nothing short of an honor. It meant her killer credentials were on point. It meant, despite the exorbitant subscription fee Bertram charged for membership, that she had access to all SK network resources: anonymity, medical aid, protection, and sanctuary when required. Luckily, she hadn't needed to avail of much yet, being a small fish in the pond. A little treatment for wounds, some hacking to remove her image from CCTV footage. All in a day's work for the network. Welcome, friends, Bertram said when the applause died down. Delighted to see you all again. Our venue is a little less luxurious than usual, but there's a reason for that. one that will become clear soon. Before we start, I want to take a moment to say that this year's nominees for our various awards were highly impressive. Kill of the Year, Sickest Mutilation, Most Creative Execution. You've outdone yourselves, and I want to congratulate everyone for their efforts. You've made me proud, and, well, just well done. Weird start, Wolfclaw whispered, and Amelia nodded. Bertram seemed more somber than usual. However, he blurted then, perking up as his eyes went to Abyss. Before we get to that, a surprise, a murmur rippled through the crowd, and Amelia felt goosebumps on her arms. As you know from my invite, their host went on, we have a special award tonight. And along with it comes a special guest. There's been a lot of speculation online as to who it might be, with one particular name being mooted more than others. Well, I don't want to keep you or him waiting any longer, so let's kick things off with our first ever Lifetime Achievement Award. Won't you join me, please, in welcoming Abyss? Applause filled the room as Abyss was guided out by the goons. His footsteps as he stomped to the podium were louder than the chants and cheers around her. But why was he secured like that? Was he here against his will? Was he a danger to his own kind? I know this looks weird, said Bertram, as Abyss was brought to a halt alongside him, quivering as though volts flowed into his neck. But sadly, dear Abyss is not the force of nature he used to be. He's had to keep a low profile these last 10 years. 2 decades as the world's most prolific serial killer is something that can take a toll. He absorbed more pure guilt than anyone before him, and handled it like a trooper. But there's a limit to all things. And 10 years ago today, he reached his. He had to be put away for everyone's safety. Just one more kill would have broken him, released the guilt. And we weren't ready. What's he talking about? Wolfclaw hissed. Amelia shook her head. She had no idea. But whatever it was, it had the potential to be epic. As he spoke, Bertram retrieved an award from behind the podium. A grotesque creation made of twisted steel. For you, he continued, presenting the award to the monster. With gratitude. But this isn't your true reward. A polished lump of metal in your hands is nothing but a weapon. I know what you'd really like is closure. Abyss closed his fist around the award, gripping it like a bludgeon, while Bertram raised an arm and clicked his fingers. Amelia sat up in her chair, watching the curtains at the back of the stage part, and another suited mook wheel out a crate. This is different, said Wolfclaw. What's the old boy up to? Does everyone remember Diamond Lagoon, 1995? Abyss's most infamous rampage. He took out an entire settlement in one night. An incredible feat of savagery. 67 residents, 66 victims, because one slipped through the net. A plucky young girl. Don't you hate them? We've all been frustrated by one of those. For Abyss, though, in a 20-year reign of terror, she was the only one who ever got away. The only blemish in an otherwise spotless career. And guess what? Bertram moved to the edge of the stage as his man undid latches on the crate.
We have her here tonight.
Gasps in the crowd as the guard opened the box and a disheveled woman fell out, barely getting her hands in front of her before hitting the floor. Her face was lined with age. Her hair was gray. She whimpered where she'd landed by Abyss, whose head was turned down as he watched.
No way,
Amelia said, as Bertram and his goons walked off the stage. Are we going to see a live kill?
You're free, Abyss,
Bertram called as he slipped through the curtains.
Let it go.
The crowd had gotten to their feet, and Amelia joined them, all eyes on the scene, keen to see what would happen next. And what happened next was like watching a movie sped up. 2x, Abyss threw his head back and howled. The woman screamed up at his hood. Abyss drove the trophy into her skull. The onlookers in the crowd cheered and jumped. Amelia's mouth fell open. Wolfclaw whistled. Abyss turned to the crowd and started to shudder. Not from being electrocuted, from something else. What was it Bertram had said? Amelia wondered. One more kill would have broken him, released the guilt. The shuddering turned to convulsions, and Abyss roared. Not now in fury, but in pain. He staggered, his body shaking violently. His head jerked back, and with a sickening crack, it split open, ripping through latex and spilling blood and bone to the floor. 3x. Black mist poured from his mask. Smoky tendrils shot forth, snaking through the air and filling the room. Writhing, maleficent tentacles that multiplied and wriggled like worms before plunging into the heads of those below, squeezing screams from their lungs. Their bodies convulsed, and their faces contorted as the guilt from Abyss took control. Amelia watched chaos unfold, beginning with Wolfclaw, who stared wide-eyed in horror from his mask as he took his machete, lifted it to his neck, and sliced through. Hot, scarlet liquid splattered her face as she looked away, her eye falling on the killers behind her, who were turning their weapons on themselves, tearing at flesh, gouging out eyes, ripping their own jaws off in a frenzy. 4x. Tendrils of mist withdrew from falling bodies, returned to the hovering mass over Abyss's corpse. Amelia tottered, unsteady, on heels slipping in blood. The screams were abating. The crowd was diminishing. Not many remained on their feet. Not many continued to be overwhelmed by the guilt of their actions. Encouraged, by the fingers of mist that had entered their brains. All of their brains, even hers. And that's when she realized she too had been invaded. But she, alone, was still standing, with a tendril of smoke connecting her to the pulsating mass, which was slowly drifting towards her from the stage. Drifting, oozing, throbbing, shrinking as it flowed into her head, filling her mind with images of her victims: bullies, narcissists, sociopaths, bigots, gaslighters, abusers, jerks. Am I supposed to feel bad for killing them? Her inner voice queried. Am I supposed to break under the weight of massive guilt? And that's when someone hit. Pause. I knew it would be you. A voice behind her, Bertram's, said, and she turned, the last of the guilt devouring her soul. Thought we'd have more time to nurture your talent, but Abyss's willpower was waning. He was going to release it soon, one last murder or not. And it needed to happen in a controlled environment. It needed to feast after being locked away for so long. And it needed to choose a new host. What is it? Amelia asked, aware of fresh darkness inside her. A force as old as time, Bertram said, taking her hand. An insatiable force that needs to be fed. But keeping it fed is not easy. And keeping it restrained, even harder. You see what it does when it's not. But it takes a certain kind of person. Abyss was that person before. 30 years he held it, a record. But it fucked him up. He was a discerning killer too, once upon a time, an idealist. He focused his darkness, like you, till he was chosen. What have you done to me? I'm sorry, Bertram said, leading her away from the carnage. As its guardian, I have to oversee the transference. It's never easy, but it's necessary. I do it to keep the world safe, believe it or not. Safe from unstoppable evil. It picked you today because you could hold it. But it's going to change you over time. It will naturally make you more feral, less controlled. A rampaging beast, if I'm honest. But it will also make you a legend. The best of the best. With the guilty conscience fueling you, you'll be Killer of the Year for as long as you want. And the next Lifetime Achievement Award will be yours. Amelia's mind was racing. His words sounded insane, but she could feel it. A growing hunger that demanded to be sated. A hunger that would make her a queen. Then I suppose I have work to do, she said, her voice sharp like the switchblade in her clutch. Bertram nodded. And I've a new network to build. Welcome to your new life, Amelia Carver. Glad to be here, she replied, accepting a kiss to her hand. I look forward to carving a fresh abyss. You're my rock. The bride and groom danced their first dance together. The room dark, the spotlight on them. Imogen, Carlson, tried and failed to grit her teeth. God, nothing was simple these days. Not even the simple acts of jealousy and resentment. How cruel this dance was to parade their beautiful normalcy for everyone to see. She glared. Her mother leaned over, but not too close. Gosh, no. And whispered into her ear, "Do try to smile, dear. You're positively green with envy. It is your cousin's wedding, after all. Couldn't you try to look happy for her? And do something about those straps, will you, dear? They're, slipping." She winced. Pun intended? But Imogen did as her mother requested. She was already on the fringes of society since her accident. She ought not to exacerbate things. Imogen sat upright straighter and forced a smile onto the thing the mirror insisted was her face. She then dug out the dress straps, which had started to dig into both shoulders. The married couple, hands clasped, faces inches apart, spun across the floor in sync. Now and then, they snuck a kiss, much to the delight of the onlookers, who cheered and whistled. The muscles beneath Imogen's eyes twitched. All she wanted was to stay at home and hide away in her room, behind the safety of closed curtains. Yes, lock herself away and await any news from the doctors and scientists. Of course, there was the possibility that they might never understand her issue or find a cure. Mom and Dad had said she couldn't isolate herself like a leper if that were the case. When she retorted that she was a leper, they'd only looked at her with wounded puppy dog eyes, and here they were, watching a couple do everyday things like touching and kissing. She'd never experience these things again unless she were okay with screams in response. The song wound to an end, and the crowd roared and applauded. The couple opened up the dance floor to friends and family, waving them over. The music changed from elegant to upbeat. Imogen's parents got up, hand in hand. Her father reached out for her, then stopped before he could hurt himself. "Would you like to?" he said, nodding towards the dancing mob. When he saw the slight shake of his wife's head, he answered himself, "No. I suppose you better not." Acidic bile stung the back of her throat. God, she wanted some cake. But she was afraid that people would watch her as she ate, horrified, but unable to look away. "Kill me now," she muttered under her breath. "Oh, if I did that, I wouldn't get to introduce you to Alan." Imogen jumped and yelped. It was Martin, the groom. He wore a tux and held a glass of white wine by the stem. He was smiling at her, a mischievous twinkle in his eyes, heart squelching in her chest. Imogen frowned. What was he here to do? Make fun of her? Pull a prank on her? She'd had enough of that from the local kids, who posted jelly packets through their letterbox. She supposed Mum had told her sister, who told her daughter, and her groom-to-be. Not that they wouldn't have been able to see that something was wrong with her as soon as she showed up. During their first dance, the only light sources were the DJ's spotlight and Imogen's skin. "Who's Alan?" Martin's smile widened. He was tipsy. "An old school chum of mine. I thought you two would hit it off." Imogen's furrowed brow deepened. Martin had to be joking. And why on earth would anybody hit it off with someone like me? "You can see me, right? Because you're looking positively radiant tonight," said Martin with a wink. Imogen stared at him. He faltered. "Sorry, not funny." The corners of her lips twitched. She could see why her cousin liked this man. He was kind and genuine. "It was a little funny," she conceded. He relaxed. "Alan's a great guy, and he just arrived. He couldn't make it to the ceremony, otherwise you'd have definitely noticed him. There had to be a catch." "Okay, well, what's wrong with him then?" Martin nodded, as though he'd expected this. "Alan had a little accident a few months back. He's been struggling with it. I thought the two of you might have a lot to talk about." Imogen winced. Man, she had a tongue of acid sometimes, like the rest of her. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean..." She shook her head. "Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's meet the guy." Martin downed the last of his wine, set it on the table, and took a fresh glass from a passing waiter's tray. "Great. Come, I'll introduce you to him. He's right over there. Now listen, he's a little sensitive about his looks, but..." Martin stopped and looked at her, swaying. "I don't think you'll judge him too harshly on that account." Imogen gasped when she saw him. Alan was sat alone in the far corner of the room, where the shadows swam, nursing a drink. He appeared to be a stone golem. "Imogen," slurred Martin, gesturing back and forth. "This is Alan I was telling you about. Alan, this is..." Imogen stepped forward with a genuine smile for the first time in months. She cut Martin off. "Imogen," she said, "it's a pleasure to meet you, Alan." Alan groaned, eyes fixated on his drink, which the servers had served him in a metal beer stein. "Yeah, sure it is. You've had your look at me now." "I haven't finished having my look at you, Alan." Alan flinched, looked up, then gasped. "Oh," he said. "Oh," she answered. Martin laughed, his glass of wine half empty. "All right. I'll pat myself on the back and leave you two to get to know each other. Have fun." She sat beside Alan, who could not take his eyes off her. She removed her polyester gloves to reveal her transparent, gooey green skin. Car crash, 2 lorries, each carrying mutagenic agents, collided. Nobody was hurt, except for a certain Imogen Carlson. She was trapped in her Pinto when the chemicals combined to make something new. Now I can't touch organic materials without absorbing and dissolving them. Alan nodded. He'd ripped his suit where he'd tried to pull it on over his gravel surface. I was backpacking alone when I got the phone call that my mum had fallen down the stairs. I rushed home, taking a shortcut through the haunted mountains. I ignored all the warning signs telling you not to. I guess the mountains took it as an insult and cursed me to a life of cold stoniness. Mum's fine, by the way. Her heart ached for him. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Must suck not being able to touch anyone. Doctors much help? She shook her head. Nope. They've no idea. Mine neither. They said they've never seen any rock like it, that it doesn't seem to be organic. She gaped at him. She looked from her green, gloopy hand to his rocky one. She looked at him, a question in her eyes. Alan took a minute to register the importance of what he'd said, eyes widening. And then he smiled and answered the question by taking her hand with his. He did not scream. There was no bubbling or sizzling. Imogen did not feel the strange sensation of eating via something other than her mouth. She'd experienced it before, and it wasn't pleasant. Wow, she said, unable to say more. Alan leaned closer. Would you like to dance, Imogen? She thought about it, then threw her anxieties to the wind. Yeah, yes, I would, Alan. On their way to the dance floor, Alan stepped on a man's foot, breaking it. Alan didn't notice the screams for an ambulance. She had his complete attention. On their way to the dance floor, Imogen brushed a woman's hair with her ungloved arm, eating the strands. She didn't notice the little shriek or the woman's death glare. He had her complete attention. Doctors have called it thingification, after the thing from Fantastic Four. My guys are calling mine blebitis, like in the blob. I see you've also spent a lot of time hiding away indoors, glued to the screen. I have too. Guess we're not so alone now, huh? She nodded. Question. The Blob. Original from 1958 or the 1988 remake? Alan pondered as they started to dance, a wide circle of empty dance floor opening up around them. The original's got its charms, but for me, the remake takes the cake. Blasphemy. I know. Imogen couldn't help but smile. Those were her thoughts exactly. She leaned forward and kissed him on his stony lips. When I first saw you, my legs turned to jelly. Alan, grinning after the initial shock of the kiss, pulled her close so they were dancing skin to skin. And when I saw you, it warmed my cold stone heart. Imogen sighed and rested her head against his chest. What a wonderful wedding. Death in the White Room. In the White Room, always clean and full of light. Death had made itself at home. It lingered like an unwelcome guest, curling up in the dark recesses behind doors, or lying in wait beneath the bed's shallow. Its ghastly form remained unseen, its wheezing breaths unheard. yet its presence was unmistakable, marked by the foul stench that clung to the air. It was a scent of old blood mingled with lye, and human refuse tinged with a sharp, lemony undertone. Arthur abhorred the lemon smell most of all. It was a poor parody of the fruit, all the sour and none of the sweet. They try to hide the nature of this place. Fresh paint over rotting wood, he said, his gaze drifting to the one dying beside him. The stranger was no more than a shadow of someone he once knew. A poor artist's rendition of his sister. Her skin, once golden and kissed by the sun, had turned pallid, marred with patches of purple. Her hair, once a rich brown, full of life and curls, had withered away to a handful of brittle wisps. Arthur had long forgotten the exact shade of his sister's eyes. Were they brown like mine? Or did they favor mother's green? He wondered, but could not recall. He could lean over this sleeping stranger's body, pry open an eye to see. But this was not his sister, as he would often lie to himself. Yet he was older now than when she first became sick. And this lie seemed harder to believe with each passing day. A nurse, the fat one with that little nose, spilled a bedpan in the corridor today, Arthur said, his voice low and bitter. Like flies drawn to shit, they swarmed over it to clean before I could see. But I did. Red. He clutched the cold hand of the stranger. White little flies. I want to pick the wings off them and watch them struggle. I want to... His words faltered as something arrested his speech. A subtle, almost imperceptible squeeze from the stranger's hand served to both soothe and silence him. The stranger was listening. Was it the cruelty I insinuated, or the profanity that stirred you for a moment? Stranger, Arthur said, a wicked little smile curving his lips, though his eyes remained wide and wanting. He watched her lids, hoping to see them open, to see her well again. Yet no such miracle could exist. Her eyelids remained heavy, puffy, and bruised. There is a bit of father in me, you know, he whispered. A nastiness. Arthur turned to his left, gazing out of the window at the dying day. A thick wall of cloud loomed just above the horizon. Its underbelly dyed a deep orange by the setting sun, while the tops blushed pink against the purple sky. A seagull had perched itself on the windowsill, its clueless yellow eyes peering in. Yet, to Arthur, those eyes seemed mocking. The bird seemed to taunt him in silence. I smell the air, fresh and clean, while you languish on your sister's slow death. With a sudden, powerful flap of its wings, the seagull took off. A small down feather drifted in, slipping through a crack in the window, landing softly by Arthur's feet. He bent down to pick it up, but even that slight disturbance of air sent it skittering away, disappearing into the shadows beneath the bed. It was dark under the bed, where the shadows coiled thick and heavy. Death slumbered there, a patient snake nestled in the tall grass, awaiting an unsuspecting foot to wander too close. Arthur felt the bite, the venom coursing through his veins, carried by the flow of his blood. Sleep claimed him soon after, and not a peaceful dream was had that night. The stranger sat perched on the window stool, fingers gently pawing at the glass, as if yearning to escape. Their white gown, soft and delicate, was adorned with 1,000 downy feathers. The moon outside shone as brightly as the midday sun, bathing the world in a clean, silver light. When the stranger turned to face Arthur, familiarity struck. His sister looked at him with knowing yellow eyes and a petulant pout on her full lips. "You should open the window," she said, her voice hollow. Arthur cleared his throat, his voice strained. "Your feathers are too small. They won't catch the wind. You would fall like a chick too eager to leave the nest." She offered a wan, knowing smile. "These aren't my wings, silly. My wings are there," she said, gesturing towards the darkness beneath the bed. "Tucked away in the shadow, you try so hard to ignore. Despite the smell I know your nose catches, would you abandon me? Ride the clouds with death and mocking seabirds, while I remain tethered to the earth with Father." Bang, bang, the sound tore through the night, rattling the very bones of the world. The moon fled, hiding behind a curtain of dark clouds. The door at the far end of the room shuddered on its rusted hinges, each violent shake loosening it further. The wood was aged and sodden, swollen with damp that wept from the splintered cracks, leaking a slow, miserable drip. Bang! Again, the assault resumed. A fist of stone, a voice of thunder on the other side. The clouds had deepened to a menacing red, pouring rain and spitting lightning. Thunder rumbled across the land, shaking the earth and rattling the windows in their frames. "I cannot be your shelter any longer," she whispered, her voice frail and sickly. "I will breathe my last, and the storm will hunt you down. The rain, relentless as it has been to me through the years, will hammer at you with the same fury. See the shadow, and together we shall fly." "I am afraid," Arthur said. The stranger took Arthur's hand in hers as he drew near. "This is what a sister's hand is for," she said softly. "To hold and be free of fear." It was day, a bright blue day, with a sky unmarred by clouds, white or gray. The window stood wide open, allowing the fragrance of rain-kissed grass to drift in. Outside, far below, a throng of tiny white flies swarmed. Sacrifice. This is an adult story, with language and content which may offend those easily offended. I can remember the sparkles. Sunshine on water. At the river, that warm day in late spring. I remember the droplets on her skin, and I remember her eyes, her huge, childlike eyes, deep brown and clear and innocent, still unaware of her beauty, a child. Her perfect sun-kissed legs. I couldn't keep my eyes off her. I thought, how long do I have? How long will it take her to finish her drink? Lips pouting round the rim. I didn't want it to end. A face like one of those perfect, golden, ratio faces that artists paint. Every single freckle was perfect, but she was real and was so beautiful it could have made me cry. And when she dived into the river, swam, ran on the bank, I watched her and I wanted her. I have skills, talents. Everyone knows I can charm, manipulate, lead them where I want them to go. Call me a wolf. But all wolves aren't the same. There is one kind with an amenable disposition, tame and gentle, following the young girls in the streets into their homes. The young girls don't know that these gentle wolves, out of all the wolves, are the most dangerous. Yes, I have skills. I know these girls. They go for the bad boy, and I am the likeness of a devouring wolf, strong and mighty, with great, large eyes, which in the night sparkle like fire, and a wide mouth with most sharp and cruel teeth, a strong body. They want me. They want the dangerous man. All the girls are racing to be the first to bleed, first to kiss, first to touch, first to fuck. It's not that they especially want any of these things, but they are terrified of being different, of being left behind. Stay with the flock, keep in time. She, as much as the others, terrified of not being the perfect girl, the girl who speaks quietly and calmly, who is always kind and nice, never mean or bossy. She who wants to fit in, not lead or lag. So, yes, I could have had her, led her there like any of the others. But this one was different. I had imagined her and I, something real. I could have shown her things, many beautiful things, and excitement too. It was a dream, I know. I know it could never happen. Eventually I'd change, and it would all go bad. The moon or the season would call me, and I'd hurt her, knowing I didn't want to. It's too hard when it comes, not something you can fight. It just happens. They know that, the ones who choose the girl to wear the hood. In the end, they all know that in the end, the bloodlust prevails. Yes, I'd eat that heart, panting hot and raw. Eat that sweet, dainty morsel. I don't know why they had to send her, why they had to send this girl. Any girl would have been okay. Any young girl. Fresh, you know. They knew. I think they knew my feelings for her. They must have known when they chose her. When they gave her the robe and the hood. Chose her as the virgin. And they knew when they sent her out. They knew she had to die like the others. Like every year. Did that make it better? Stronger? They for sure didn't think of me. Why would they? None of them ever cared about me. Here we are on the path. Her rich cascade of auburn hair tumbling out from her hood. She's skipping, smiling. With that basket full of wine. Some bring cakes, bake things. But she knew her grandmother, and her grandmother, old hag, crept away. She knew what was coming. She left the door unlocked and sneaked into the forest, kept herself safe. That's not as she'll tell it, but that's how it was. Her name doesn't matter now. She is the blood, the offering. They've dressed her in the robe, the hood. She's on the path. Everyone knows where this ends. Everyone but her. They will speak of her by her robe. She had a name, Diani, sweet, soft Diani. Diani, always with a smile, and so generous it was close to foolish. Her name meant dear, fitting perhaps, now. Now she is just the girl in the red hood. If she wasn't here, now, sometime later, she would have taken my hand and drawn it onto her breast, and it would have been sweet. In that cottage, on that bed, and she'd love the soft skin of my penis on her lips, and she'd smile when I shuddered as I came inside her, like a child given a gift. But this afternoon isn't going to end like that. I hate them for that. I want to call a pack and hunt them all down. They should fear me now. Those cruel men choosing her, making me do this, the worst thing, the worst part of this nightmare. What is destroying what soul I have left is I know she will taste good, good as she looks. I have always loved the way she looks. Pale skin and that mass of dark hair tumbling out from her hood. Those child eyes. Too big, really. Those dark brown eyes. A beautiful child face on a woman. I want to look into them and for her to see me. The real me, you know? Not just the teeth. How long has this gone on? Thousands of years. I have read. Yes, I do read. I am educated. I have read the Greek. Pausanias knew the how and why, told the story in which, each year, a virgin girl was offered to a malevolent spirit, offered as a sacrifice. And this spirit, dressed in the skin of a wolf, raped and ate the girl. They will tell another story, one that ends well. The girl will be rescued. Wishful thinking. A better story for their guilt. A happy fairy tale. Keep out of the woods. Don't speak to strangers. No one will mention Diani. They will agree, without words, not to mention her. They won't admit they chose the story. They chose the girl. I will be the malevolent spirit. Everyone believes there's a malevolent spirit. What does that mean, malevolent? I don't hate her. I do what they want. I do it for them. Someone has to. Someone always has. 1,000 girls, 1,000 innocent young girls, 1,000 virgins. So their crops will grow. So their gods will smile. I don the skin, the rank smelling skin, and pull the fangs into my mouth. It will haunt me. Next year, and the years after, all I will see is her eyes. I will see my teeth in her eyes. Watch her last moments, her confusion, and the rising fear. Her scream as I take her. Remember her hair tumbling from her hood. Remember the soft, sweet taste on my lips. As we stroll through the woods, the flowers mock me. They cover the peaceful, sun-dappled glades. Bluebells crowding round the base of the trees like flirting girls. Sweet-smelling columbine in the glades. The dog violet line her path. Bow as she walks to her sacrifice. Take your time, pick some flowers, I say. It's a lovely day. I know I'm going to do this. I know the flowers will cover the smell of your fear and your blood when I take you. Will help cover the stench when my teeth rip open your stomach. The gods will smile. They're bastard smiling gods. And the villagers, they all know it's happening. Duplicitous, lying, cruel bastards. They will cover it up again. They will tell their tales like they always do. But they know, they all know what big teeth I have and who I'm going to eat. Bernice. Theme parks are the best. The roller coasters rule. But I didn't want to go into the House of Horrors. It looked dark and creepy. And I knew it was full of dead things and madmen, like the pictures on my dad's scary videos. That kind of stuff made my insides squirm and threaten to erupt buckets of puke. But Bernice had the tickets and me by the hand, and she was dragging me along and wouldn't stop. What was I supposed to do? Sit down and cry? I'd look like a baby, and Bernice would laugh. It was the first time she'd talked to me, so I didn't want that. Instead, I let her lead me to that dirty, gray building with the gargoyle-covered, finger-like spires, which rose into the cloudless, midday sky like a giant, concrete hand waiting to grab us. My feet dragged. The ground felt like quicksand. But Bernice kept me out by moving fast, getting us to the looming mansion, safe and sound. I said nothing when she handed the tickets to the bored-looking teenager wearing a Raiders of the Lost Ark t-shirt who was manning the booth. I said nothing when he complained we were too young, but it was okay if we really weren't scared. I said nothing when Bernice told him our parents said it was fine and pulled me through the thick sheets of plastic that hung like strips of flesh in the open door. I could still feel Dad's hand on my shoulder, nudging me on like he had towards Bernice. It was like I was being carried by that same momentum as I stepped forward into the darkness. And then, there I was, in a haunted house in Pleasure Beach in Blackpool, holding hands with a girl from Northern Ireland. And I couldn't really believe this was me. Because if there was one thing I hated more than monsters, it was girls. Or at least, that's what I thought. Just a few minutes earlier, I'd been eating a burger at a white plastic picnic table on the veranda of the theme park family restaurant, sitting on a wobbly chair and slurping Coke while acting out a battle with my Star Wars toys. That's when I spotted the girl from our hotel, watching me from her seat a few tables away. It made me splutter Coke all over my Goonies t-shirt, because I hadn't expected to see anyone I knew here, so I hadn't been holding back on the sound effects. I tried not to go red as I looked away, sliding Vader and Luke into my lap. But I was glowing with embarrassment, so I failed. Like me, she was eating lunch with her family at one of the flimsy tables crammed into the packed restaurant courtyard. Like me, she was also trying to entertain herself while her parents babbled on about nothing, taking forever to finish eating and wasting precious attraction riding time. Except she was doing it in the less embarrassing way of juggling tennis balls. I knew her name was Bernice because that's what her sisters called her in the hotel lounge every evening, where I read Spider-Man comics, and she juggled. She made those balls go so fast, it was hard not to sneak a glance. She never even dropped one, and mostly, she wasn't even paying attention to what she was doing. I tried not to care. I tried not to think she was cool, with her straw-colored hair tied up in pigtails and those freckles on her nose that were kind of cute. But she kept catching me watching, which was annoying. It made her stupid. Older sisters giggle, whisper in her ear, and laugh. I knew they were talking about me. It made my cheeks tingle and burn, so I had to get up and leave the room. I always looked back as I did, and she was always staring after me, and now She'd seen me playing with my Star Wars toys, and for some reason, I felt really dumb. I didn't want to look at her again, with my red face and coke-stained shirt, but my head wouldn't stop, and when it turned, I got a horrible surprise. Bernice wasn't at her table anymore. She was standing right there beside mine, a tennis ball clutched in each hand. "Hey, my ma'am gave me tickets for a ride. Are you coming?" "What? Are you coming on a ride with me? I'm bored." "Go on, Kev," my dad said, nudging me out of my seat and pushing me towards her. Luke and Vader fell from my knees and hit the flagstones. "You kids go ride the Chair O planes. We'll be finished when you get back, and we'll do another roller coaster." I didn't have time to retrieve my toys, and I didn't want to be seen doing it anyway. They were my favorite ones, and I didn't want to lose them. But suddenly, Bernice's eyes and smile seemed more important. She stuffed her tennis balls into the pockets of her jacket, then grabbed me by the hand, and we were off, weaving our way through the tables and crowds out of the restaurant. Her sisters staring after us, sticking their tongues out and making kissy noises with their lips. And that was that. Except Bernice didn't want to go on the Chair O planes. And now I was in what looked like the dirtiest of dungeons, with plastic skeletons jiggling on the walls, dim red bulbs barely illuminating the hall, and the sound of recorded screams filling the air. My heart pounded like it was trying to break free, my breath catching with each shadow that stretched from the walls. The darkness seemed to tug at my limbs, squeezing tighter with every screech. I didn't like the plastic vampire sucking on the neck of a mannequin. I didn't like the wax werewolf with its snout stuck in the entrails of a scarecrow. I didn't like the life-size, glowering Jack the Ripper, blocking our path with his blood-stained knife. It wasn't just that. The whole place stank of mothballs and mold, a damp smell that reminded me of Gran's house when we'd gone to clear it out after she died. That same scent of damp or death. I wasn't sure which had stuck with me after just an hour in her house a year before. And it was back now, stronger than ever. And the air didn't just smell bad. It felt bad, like a horrible weight pressing down on me, squeezing the oxygen from my lungs, like Vader using the Force to crush a throat. I hated it, every bit, but Bernice loved it all. She squealed in delight at every discovery, pulling me through the halls at breakneck speed, barely pausing at each horrific sight before barreling us on to the next one, which was good in a way, as I didn't want to be there longer than necessary, but bad in another way, because I'd barely recovered from one scare before another leapt out. Frankenstein's monster staring wide-eyed on a table, blood chilling.
a trio of witches at a smoking cauldron full of bones. Nerve-wracking, a pack of rabid dogs with drooling teeth. Terrifying. And let's not talk about the clown. I tried not to show I was afraid. I mimicked her shoulders bobbing and her arms swinging when she laughed and joked around and agreed the scary things were really cool. When she playfully pushed me towards the creature from the Black Lagoon, I made sure my intended yelp came out a giggle. When she said, grabbed my hand, and told me she was scared of Norman Bates, I bravely tightened my grip and said it was fine. I was glad it was dark, because that meant she couldn't see the expressions on my face, or how my eyes were squinting most of the time. I was gladder still when we rounded a final corner and saw the word exit. We were almost out. It had seemed like an age, but was probably only 5 minutes. Somehow, I'd made it without peeing my pants, and she had no reason to think I was a baby. With luck, she might even have forgotten Star Wars, and that's when it all went wrong. My ball, she gasped, releasing my hand to search in both her pockets. I lost one of my balls. Oh no, I replied, looking at the floor, hoping I'd find it. When did you lose it? I don't know, Bernice snapped, knocking me against the rickety wall as she pushed past. That's a stupid question. If I knew that it wouldn't be lost, I'm going to find it. She didn't wait for me to answer. Didn't wait at all. Just ran back into the corridor we'd come out of and disappeared. Bernice, I shouted, and my face tingled when I said her name aloud. Wait! She didn't. I stared at the corner she'd turned, hoping to hear her call back, listening for a trace of her, even her footsteps. But the wails from the speakers seemed to be getting louder and louder, seemed to be laughing at me now. I turned the other way and looked at the exit ahead, green letters glowing in the darkness, which seemed even darker now I was alone. For a second, I thought about running, getting out of there and waiting outside. For a second, maybe 2. But deep down, I knew I couldn't do that. I didn't want her to think I was a wimp. Being brave was somehow important now, but it wasn't the only reason I decided to follow her. I wanted to make sure she was okay. Dad would have been angry if I didn't, if I'd left her alone and something happened. I'd heard him say to Mom how he hated himself for not visiting Gran more often, for not making sure she was okay. Bernice wasn't my friend, but she could be, and friends wouldn't leave each other alone. Not in a place like this, even if the threat was all fake, especially because the threat was all fake. So back around the corner I went, straight into the arms of the skinned alive man who reached for me from an alcove in the wall. I didn't make eye contact with his lifeless wax eyes because he looked bloody and hideous, and I hated him. I moved on, walking faster, retracing my steps through the corridors, peering into the darkness at the shadowy figures that lurked there, trying not to see them if they weren't her. My heart pounded faster. My feet moved quicker. The screams, laughs, seemed to grow louder the further I went. I started to imagine that some of those screams might be hers, that some creature made of wax had somehow grabbed her. And then I was running, starting to panic, taking a corner too fast, yelping when I ran into monsters. "Watch it!" One of them, with stringy hair, shouted, putting an arm out to stop me. "You shouldn't be here, you little dweeb. Where's your mother?" It didn't take me long to realize they were just a couple of teenagers, a boy and a girl, both with long hair, holding hands. Still, I ducked under the outstretched arm and ran past them. I don't know why. I should have asked for help, or even asked if they'd seen her, but they were teenagers. They wouldn't have cared. Coming around the next corner, I saw two things that stopped me in my tracks. The first was the naked old man in the bathtub, with his black eyes and bath cap, stubbly beard, and thin, bony arm in the air, holding a long-handled scrubber. This one wasn't a monster, not any I'd ever heard of, but somehow he scared me the most. I hadn't been able to look at him the first time around, had kept my eyes glued to the floor while Bernice giggled and peered into the bath. This time, I had to look, because the second thing I noticed was the tennis ball he was holding in his outstretched hand. "Bernice!" I hissed, gulping as I stepped towards the bathtub. "Are you there?" Screams, screeches, shrieks and squawks from above. I moved closer, keeping my eyes on the tennis ball and not on the face of the man. He wasn't real. I knew that. He was made of wax. He couldn't hurt me. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't move. So why was the ball in his hand? And why was Bernice in the bath? It took me a second to understand what I was seeing. Bernice, lying face down on the smooth surface of wax that was meant to be water, from which the old man was rising up, her short auburn hair fanned out around her head, skirt hitched up around her knees. "Bernice," I whispered again, doing everything I could not to cry. "Are you okay?" My legs bumped against the rim of the ceramic bathtub. I lifted one arm to reach out. My eyes flicked to the face of the waxwork, which was far too close, its horrible blank gaze boring into me. The red bulb above the bathtub flickered. My fingers touched the top of Bernice's head. Something, arms, grabbed me from behind. And something, voices, screamed in my ears on both sides. I screamed, staggered back, stumbled and fell to the floor. The flickering light bulb revealed two gangly forms, twisted shapes in the darkness, closing in around me, reached out their arms, making strange, slurping sounds that sounded like kisses. "Gotcha!" laughed one, and I knew straight away who it was. "Ha ha ha! You screamed like a little girl. Oh no! Did you piss your pants? Oh, are you really scared? Do you want your mommy?" Bernice rose up in the bathtub, bumping the bulb and making it swing as her sisters danced around me, clutching their sides in laughter. The grin on her lips disappeared when she noticed the look on my face in the swinging light. "That was brilliant," laughed one of the girls, high-fiving the other above me. "Come on, Burr. Ma'am and Dad are waiting." And just like that, they were gone, racing away from the bathtub and the wax man and me on the floor and Bernice. And that's why I always avoided girls. I pushed myself up while Bernice climbed out of the tub and took back her ball. She had her back to me, and I had my eyes on the floor. She started to walk away, and I thought, good, go, leave me alone with your stupid straw hair and ugly freckles. But then she stopped in her tracks and looked back. "Sorry," she said, and I looked into a pair of darting eyes. It was my sister's idea. Kind of stupid, kind of. I thought it would be funny. A good prank. But it wasn't. She came closer. "It was nice you came after me. I wasn't sure you would." I blushed, looked at my feet. I just wanted her to go. The screams from the speakers were better company. The lifeless creations populating the labyrinth were less likely to hurt me than, "Are you coming?" She lifted her arm and held out her hand, and I blushed even more and looked up. "We came in together. You're not gonna let me walk out on my own, are ya? One of the monsters might get me." She smiled. A small smile, apologetic. She was being friendly for real, and I liked it. I mirrored her smile and felt a flutter in my chest, something strange that made a lump catch in my throat. I had to swallow hard to get rid of it. "At least you have those tennis balls to throw, if it does." "Yeah, they make great weapons. Not as good as lightsabers, but here." She handed the one she was holding to me and took the other one out of her pocket. I thought of Luke and Vader on the ground back at the restaurant and wondered if they'd still be there when I got back. Mom and Dad definitely wouldn't have seen them. Any other time, the fear of losing them would have stabbed arrows of dread into my heart and had me racing back in a panic. But I didn't seem too bothered by it now. When Bernice offered her hand again, I took it. And then we were walking back the way we'd come, through the monsters and the noise towards the exit, the wailing house of horrors, with its hallways full of scares closed in around us. But as we walked hand in hand through the corridors, past eerie figures, and through screams that now seemed to be quieter, I wasn't really afraid anymore. With Bernice by my side, it was like we were off on an adventure, like the Goonies in their subterranean caves. And even if our caves did house monsters, I realized they weren't so scary, and neither were girls. One book. Wonder. New York City, 1955. Lonnie White pulled up his collar at a Fifth Avenue bookstore window against the cold. Black patches from lack of sleep lay under his eyes. Snowflakes, each an unkindly tiny angel to his mind, descended in the night. But it wasn't the crystals scurrying down his back that gave him the shudders, nor was it the ice melting in the hollow of his back. It was the overwhelming thought the snow crystals gathered together purposely of one mind, a sentient being. This is not possible, he told himself, but it feels all the same, like crystals of death prescient in their condemnation. He laughed at the poetic twist, coming out of his throat like a choking hack. The absurdity of his mind. The existence of hell is ridiculous. Well-dressed Manhattanites strolled by. Ankle-length dresses, pillbox hats, fedoras, and double-breasted suits. Lights flashed, and horns blared from hulking post-war automobiles, as if crying out to him alone, as if they knew him, were accusing him. Lost in thought, he stared, unblinking, at the best-selling novel on display, Scarlet Streets. A photo of the author, Julia Christensen, was poised on the back cover, a beautiful blonde. Her soft brown eyes radiated an undeniable sexual allure. If a passerby were to listen, which they never did, they might hear Lonnie mumbling at the window as they skirted around him. A bestseller, he would announce quietly, shaking his head ever so slowly. A bestseller. A young man. Lonnie was as plain could be. He wore jeans under a green military jacket, though he had never been in the service. Neither handsome nor ugly, he was a man no one noticed. And yet, he preferred it that way. A ghost to the world. Anyone who bothered to look closely could see he was deranged in his loneliness. But no one bothered to look at all, much less closely. His only unique quality was that he lived alone in a 30-room Washington Heights castle, north of Manhattan. The medieval structure was inherited when his parents died. The trust paid the taxes and bills, providing him a stipend to live on. He had no family, no need for a job, no need for friends. Occasionally, like now, he would visit what he thought of as his storefront and think back to Julia, his one and only lover. I loved her, he said to the glass. I truly did. I'm not a bad person. They had met randomly when they had shared a park bench the previous summer. He had guessed she was an actress, and she had responded with a shy smile, as if he had guessed correctly. For some reason, he had mentioned Shakespeare was an actor and a writer. She, of course, had asked if he was a writer. He had admitted this was true, letting his ego lead the way, as men will do when impressing young women. But he felt he was not an authentic writer by any stretch. For this, he had to publish. He simply tapped away on his Smith Corona clipper within his castle tower, his garret, overlooking the Hudson River. Sweating, smoking endless, unfiltered Chesterfields, he pursued his great American novel from a place where his dire imaginings could flow. Julia's eyes had glowed a special admiring look, and he let the inner warmth of another human being bath him. Much to his surprise, they struck a friendship which began with meeting for coffee in the village and eventually moved on to lovemaking in her apartment. One thing he knew for sure was to never bring her to his castle, for then she would know he had risen no higher in life than an unemployed trust fund recipient and was not a successful writer. This was wrong of him, he knew. But what could he do? This beautiful woman gave him the kind of attention he had never had. Is there any actual harm in letting her think better of me than you really are? Is it so bad to go out and embellish your wardrobe with fine suits to be the man you want to be? What if this is your only and last chance to feel a love and sexual embrace you had known only others to have? And so the deception went on until Julia, as any curious woman would, wanted to see what Lonnie had written. The book he had been tinkering away at did exist in a high stack of typed-out white paper, cross-outs, and scribbles. Nobody had ever read it. The book was just the tapping on typewriter keys to burn his time. But as proof he was a writer, he gathered up the stacks of pages, 300 or more, and took them to Julia. He laid them before her as an offering, and so, as the days went on, he would sprawl on her apartment couch while she read through his novel, page by page, hour by hour. "Don't stare at me while I'm reading, silly," Julia would say, never offering her opinion. Each day, he returned panic-stricken to his castle, for his greatest hope, his desperate passion, was that Julia would like the novel. One word from her could save or crush any last vestiges of self-esteem remaining in his lonely life. He paced and paced into the night in his cavernous dining room, biting his nails. My God, what will she think of my novel? He thought. What if she doesn't like it, but she did like it? And more than just liking it, she had a friend who she thought could publish the work with the oldest publisher in New York, a specialist in suspense and murder. To Lonnie, this seemed beyond comprehension, beyond any imaginings of success he could think of or even dream. Yes, he pleaded. Anything your friend can do, do. And so he released the pile of pages with Julia to take to her friend. In just 2 short weeks, Julia had word back from Bill. Could Lonnie meet her at her apartment? But it was only later, when she was across from Lonnie in a red leather booth, sipping her gin martini, fresh from their lovemaking, a pink glow glistening on her cheeks, that she said, "I have some news about your book." Lonnie was speechless. He stared, transfixed on her siren's face, her blonde hair cascading in Lonnie's imagination, just the hint of a rise and fall of her breasts under her white blouse. "The manuscript is accepted for publication," she said. This was beyond happiness for Lonnie to hear. The novel, and only from Julia's connections, would become a success. Life was truly grand. "But there is one thing," Julia said, her delicate nails holding a martini glass. "Bill says the marketing of the book is crucial. He won't back it unless we have the right, how did he put it? Image. That's it. The right image." Julia laid out the requirements. "The author needs to be a woman. Me, actually. You have to understand how important this is. Bill says books sell with sexy authors. And you, Lonnie, well, as much as I love you, do you want the book to be successful? It could make a lot of money." At first, Lonnie thought, "No way will I let my book go to a publishing house unless under my name." But then he also thought about what he would walk away from. Lonnie was simply a hobbyist writer. Sure, now that he knew a publisher was interested, he could send it out to multiple publishers and maybe find someone else. But with Julia as the author, he had something else. He had Julia. He had the last and only pleasure he would ever find in a woman. A woman who would likely be offended if he didn't do things her way. A woman who he didn't want to risk losing. It was decided. Julia Christensen would be the author. Lonnie, the ghostwriter. "Do you think it would be a good idea to send it out to other publishers?" Lonnie asked. Julia bristled, her eyes staring down. "Maybe, if you don't trust me." This, of course, settled it. The book came to market, and at first went nowhere, but slowly gained traction as a sleeper with a growing readership. A tragic murder mystery with a twist. Heart-rending, the New York Post book summaries said. And so, in 6 months, the book climbed into the bestsellers and became, by all appearances, a blockbuster. At least it was successful from Lonnie's view. Reading the trades and watching Julia Christensen on the talk shows, the book is a hit. A tremendous hit, Julia said, after dragging her upper teeth against her lower lip. Lonnie stared, mesmerized. They were perched on Julia's new kitchen island. She had explained she needed a nicer apartment in case news people were to follow her home. Image, she explained, was everything. Lonnie fidgeted in his chair. It seems like we should get an advance or something? Julia flipped her right hand, as if swiping a bothersome mosquito. All the money went to marketing, dear. Lonnie took in the marble kitchen island, the lavish oriental rugs, the view of Manhattan. Hesitating like she had remembered something, Julia said, "You'll see. The truth is, I wouldn't even have taken this apartment if Bill hadn't insisted. I've never met Bill. Soon, honey, soon. You'll like him." Within a few months, Lonnie was leaving messages for Julia, and she wasn't calling back. What could be wrong? True, it might offend her, but he decided to stop by. How else could he see her, set things right? He knew she was busy, but this was only fair. A man Lonnie had never met answered the apartment door. "My good man, you must be Lonnie," he said. Lonnie could smell greasy hair tonic. The man was lanky, tall, and Lonnie had never seen a human being whose eyes smiled less. "Julia?" "Lonnie!" Wearing a white robe, loose enough for Lonnie to realize this was all she wore, Julia leaned through the doorway of the kitchen. "I would have called you. Finally, you meet Bill." "Bill? Introduce yourself." But Bill didn't have time, as Lonnie swept past him to Julia, who was poking cubes of raw steak and vegetables with a skewer, chopped potatoes, onions, a cucumber. Something rose up in Lonnie, an anger in his chest that grabbed his heart, prevented him from taking a breath as he choked down a venomous, dark taste. Julia could see the anguish in Lonnie's eyes, the naive awareness widening in a little boy's innocence. "What? You think I'd tie up with a loser? A one-book wonder. You've got nothing, Lonnie, not even your book. Now get lost." But we stole it, Lonnie. Your book, yes, but more than that, we stole your creative energy, your mind. It wasn't the words she said that ripped through Lonnie's mind. No. It was recognizing the flush on Julia's face that Lonnie so cherished that set him off, causing him to lose himself in an inner roar rising into the front of his brain. A blinding white. Lonnie grabbed the shish kebab skewer and held the back of Julia's head by grabbing her hair with his left hand. He plunged the steel point into Julia's right eye, then slowly thrust the length forward, his head slightly tilting in curiosity at the ease of the pointed steel scrunching through to the rear of her skull. She screamed and fell, with her hands gripping her face. Lonnie yanked out the skewer, and he was no longer slow or curious. He punched the steel again and again into her chest, blood splattering on her white robe. With each thrust, he felt the emptiness of his life, the never having the authentic love of even one woman. It was so ruthlessly unfair. He ignored Bill as he turned to leave. Bill, near catatonic, remained riveted on Julia's crumpled body. Within weeks, Lonnie picked up the New York Post. A sordid murder affair was splashed on the front page. Author Christensen, murder solved. Kennedy gets the chair. The story described a Mr. William Kennedy who pimped for this lady of the evening, Julia Christensen, until she hit it big with her book. The whore who wrote a bestseller, the article said. Just a pimp and his whore, it turned out. A common story on the streets of New York. Lonnie continued to live in his drafty Washington Heights monstrosity. Sure, he had committed a murder, he thought, but fully justified, pushed beyond his limit, and betrayed on so many levels. Who wouldn't? He often found himself on Fifth Avenue at the window of his bookstore as the winter diminished, spring ended, and summer began. In the window, scarlet streets taunted him. The book bragged to him how it was an even greater smash since the prostitute author was murdered. Lonnie paced his castle tower well into the night. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He now knew he had written a bestseller, but he couldn't claim it. He also had writer's block, but knew why. Julia had taken his creative mind and died with it, stolen it, as she had said. She had taken who he was somehow, his talent. But no worries. He knew how to get his creativity back. This only made sense. He grinned to himself. That's it. What greater power than talent? And I'll have plenty. The woman lying in front of Lonnie had published not one, but 4 novels. He had followed her down the dark streets of Brooklyn. And it wasn't difficult, with a little chloroform, to get her back to his castle. She was now tucked safely away within the basement crypt. His parents' bodies lay resting near her in the gray stones, their mouths aghast, eyes open. They lay in graves covered with a clear, glass-like resin. Tossing notepaper to the girl, he demanded she write. Later, he would take the notes to his garret tower and plink away on his Smith Corona. Plink, plink, plink. But this wasn't enough. Only by piercing his eyes into the depth of her creative mind, fusing his eyes with hers in an inexorable transformation, could the process work. He strapped her down on her back and lay prone against the top of her, her soft warmth compressed against him. He sensed her terror. "Don't blink," he begged, digging into her pupils with his own. "The windows are your soul," he pleaded. "I must meet you at exactly the right moment, the moment your eyes go dead." He tightened his hands ever so slowly on her throat, saving the moment, perfecting, staring. As the girl's eyes died, he could feel her talent moving to his own mind, exquisitely. The tiny angels of a sentient being joined him, the ice crystals, the snow, Once completed, he could feel his creativity soaring. He couldn't wait to go to his garret. Couldn't wait to join his smith Corona. But first, some business. This was only Maud, a respect. He honored her with her own place and lay her carefully, lovingly, he felt, in an open grave, the row his parents lay in. Covering her with clear resin, she formed a sanctuary of her own, her face aghast, mouth open, eyes seemingly aware. But even while doing so, he tried not to dwell on the acid in his stomach. The burst of talent she'd given him would play out. When the time came, he knew there was only one way to refill his creativity. The snow talked to him, beckoned him on. The crystal angels